The sun was setting behind the ominous clouds as the rusty gates of Blackstone Asylum creaked open, revealing the menacing structure that loomed in the distance. Journalist Sarah Adams had been granted exclusive access to document the infamous institution's dark past. As she drove up the long winding path, a shiver ran down her spine, as if the very air was alive with the tortured souls that had once roamed these halls. Sarah's car came to a halt in front of the towering Gothic-style building, its weathered facade a testament to the years of decay and neglect. The massive wooden doors groaned as she pushed them open, her heart pounding in her chest. She was greeted by an eerie silence, broken only by the distant echo of her footsteps on the cold marble floor. "Welcome to Blackstone Asylum, Miss Adams," said a sinister voice, making her jump. Dr. Frederick Hawthorne, the asylum's warden, emerged from the shadows, his cold, calculating gaze sending another chill down Sarah's spine. "I trust you'll find our humble establishment enlightening," he added with a twisted smile. As they walked down the dimly lit corridors, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The walls seemed to close in around her, the portraits of long-deceased doctors staring down at her with judgmental eyes. The air grew colder, thick with a sense of foreboding. Dr. Hawthorne led Sarah into a large, dust-covered room filled with rusting equipment and long-forgotten patient files. "This," he said, gesturing around, "was the heart of Blackstone Asylum. Countless souls have passed through these halls, seeking refuge from their tormented minds. Some found solace, others only darkness." Sarah's eyes were drawn to the peeling paint and cracked walls, her heart aching for the patients who had suffered within these confines. She pulled out her voice recorder and began asking Dr. Hawthorne questions about the asylum's history, but her thoughts were constantly pulled towards the unnerving atmosphere that seemed to envelop her. As the tour continued, Sarah's unease grew. She felt the weight of the tragic stories that lingered in each room, and the whispers of long-dead patients seemed to echo through the hallways. Despite the dilapidated state of the asylum, it was as if the building itself had absorbed the anguish and despair that had once filled its chambers. As dusk turned to night, Sarah found herself in the asylum's abandoned library. The moonlight cast eerie shadows through the broken windows, illuminating the tattered books and newspapers that littered the floor. She suddenly felt a cold breeze on her neck, and she could have sworn she heard a faint whisper in her ear. Sarah shuddered, wrapping her arms around herself as she quickly gathered her belongings. She had seen enough for one day. As she made her way back towards the entrance, she couldn't help but feel that her presence had awoken something dark and sinister within the asylum's walls. Dr. Hawthorne escorted her to the front doors, his expression unreadable. "I trust you've had an illuminating experience, Miss Adams," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "Do return tomorrow. We have only scratched the surface of Blackstone's secrets." Sarah nodded, eager to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the asylum. As she stepped outside and the heavy doors slammed shut behind her, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched by unseen eyes, their malevolent gaze piercing her very soul. She hurried to her car and drove away, the imposing silhouette of Blackstone Asylum receding in her rearview mirror. As the darkness swallowed the building whole, Sarah couldn't help feeling that something evil was waiting to be unleashed. As she drove away from the cursed building, the whispers of the damned followed her into the night, a chilling reminder of the horrors that awaited her return. Sarah's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as she drove back to her hotel, her thoughts consumed by the disturbing scenes she had witnessed at Blackstone Asylum. As she lay in bed that night, sleep eluded her, her mind replaying the sinister whispers and the unsettling atmosphere that had enveloped the forsaken building. Morning came, and Sarah reluctantly prepared herself for another day at the asylum. As much as she wanted to forget about the horrors she had encountered, she knew she had a duty to uncover the truth and bring the asylum's dark secrets to light. Mentally preparing herself, She gathered her belongings and headed back to the wretched place, her determination driving her forward. As she approached the towering gates once more, the shiver of dread passed through her. Sarah steeled her nerves and whispered a silent prayer, hoping that whatever malevolent force she had awoken would not claim her as its next victim. With a deep breath, she stepped back into the haunted halls of Blackstone Asylum, prepared to face the terror that awaited her. Unbeknownst to her, the shadows stirred, and the tortured souls within the asylum stirred, watching her every move with bated breath, ready to reveal the twisted secrets that lay hidden within the depths of Blackstone Asylum. Sarah returned to Blackstone Asylum, the foreboding structure casting its oppressive shadow over her. The massive doors creaked open, and she was once again greeted by the sinister presence of Dr. Frederick Hawthorne. "Ah, Miss Adams," he said, a wicked grin stretching across his face, "I trust you've rested well. Are you ready to delve deeper into the mysteries of Blackstone?" Despite her apprehension, Sarah nodded, determined to uncover the asylum's hidden truths. Dr. Hawthorne led her further into the depths of the building, each step echoing through the dark, silent halls. They descended into the lower levels of the asylum, where the air grew even colder, and an oppressive atmosphere weighed heavily upon Sarah's shoulders. She couldn't help but feel the sorrow and anguish that had saturated the very walls, remnants of the tormented souls who had once been confined here. As they walked, Dr. Hawthorne spoke of the asylum's history, his voice filled with a twisted pride. He shared stories of Blackstone's early days, when the institution was hailed as a beacon of hope for the mentally ill. However, as time passed, the facility's reputation soared, with rumors of cruel treatments and inhumane experiments spreading like wildfire. Sarah listened intently, her heart aching for the patients who had suffered in this nightmarish place. As they ventured further, they reached a long-abandoned wing of the asylum. The doors were rusted shut, and cobwebs blanketed the windows, a testament to the passage of time. Dr. Hawthorne unlocked one of the doors, revealing a dark, musty room filled with cots and long-forgotten personal belongings. "This," he whispered, his voice barely audible, "is where our most troubled patients resided. They were considered incurable, their minds lost to the darkest recesses of madness." Sarah shuddered, the palpable pain and despair in the room almost unbearable. She took out her camera, carefully documenting the haunting remnants of the lives that had once been lived within these walls. As they continued exploring the abandoned wing, Sarah began to hear faint, unsettling noises, the sound of footsteps, distant whispers, and the echo of long-forgotten cries. She felt as if she were being watched by invisible eyes, their hateful gaze boring into her very soul. Dr. Hawthorne seemed oblivious to the chilling atmosphere, leading Sarah deeper into the darkness. As they approached a heavy iron door, he paused, his hand resting on the cold metal. "Beyond this door," he said, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anticipation, "lie the secrets that have haunted Blackstone Asylum for decades. Are you prepared to face the horrors that await you, Miss Adams?" Sarah hesitated, her instincts screaming for her to turn back. But she knew that she couldn't let her fear hold her back, not when so many lives had been destroyed by the sinister forces that lurked within the asylum's walls. With a deep breath, she nodded, her resolve unwavering. Dr. Hawthorne slowly opened the door, revealing a pitch-black chamber. As Sarah stepped into the darkness, she felt a surge of pure terror, as if she had crossed a threshold into a realm of unspeakable evil. The air was thick with the stench of decay and suffering, and an overwhelming sense of dread threatened to suffocate her. Dr. Hawthorne flicked on a flashlight, casting a dim, flickering light across the room. Sarah's eyes widened in horror as she took in the grotesque scene before her. The chamber was filled with old, rusted medical equipment and stained gurneys, the remnants of twisted experiments and torturous treatments. The walls were adorned with faded photographs and tattered documents, testaments to the depths of depravity that had consumed Blackstone Asylum. In the corner, a rusted operating table stood as a chilling reminder of the pain and torment that had once been inflicted within these walls. Sarah felt her stomach churn, her heart aching for the countless souls who had been subjected to unspeakable horrors. She knew that she had to expose the truth, to ensure that the memories of those who had suffered would not be forgotten. As she began to document the gruesome scene, a sudden gust of icy wind blew through the chamber, extinguishing the flashlight's beam. Plunged into darkness, Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The whispers grew louder, the anguished cries of the damned filling her ears, as the malevolent forces within the asylum began to stir. And as she stood there, trembling in the darkness, Sarah knew that her journey into the heart of Blackstone Asylum had only just begun. She was now inextricably entwined with the dark secrets and twisted history of this cursed place, and she could not turn back. Sarah fumbled in her bag, her fingers finally grasping a spare flashlight. She switched it on, casting a weak glow across the room. Dr. Hawthorne's face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and fascination. "We should leave," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the howling wind and the anguished cries that filled the chamber. "There are things here that should not be disturbed." But Sarah was undeterred. She had come to expose the truth, and she would not be swayed by fear. With a resolute nod, she continued her documentation, each image and recording a testament to the suffering and torment that had been inflicted upon the innocent. As they finally retreated from the chamber, the door slammed shut behind them, sealing away the horrors they had witnessed. They were both shaken, but Sarah's determination had only grown stronger. With the harrowing experience of the chamber fresh in their minds, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne emerged from the depths of the asylum, their footsteps echoing through the desolate hallways. The air was heavy with tension, as if the very walls were whispering a warning to those who dared to uncover Blackstone's long-buried secrets. "Miss Adams," Dr. Hawthorne said, his voice strained, "I must implore you to reconsider your investigation. There are forces at play here that are beyond our comprehension, and I fear that delving deeper may only invite further peril." But Sarah would not be deterred. The horrors she had seen only strengthened her resolve to bring the dark history of Blackstone Asylum to light, no matter the cost. She thanked Dr. Hawthorne for his concern, but assured him that she was prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they made their way back to the asylum's entrance, the shadows seemed to grow darker, the air colder, and the whispers of the damned more insistent. It was as if the very spirit of Blackstone Asylum was rising to meet them, determined to protect its secrets at any cost. As the sun began to set, casting an eerie twilight over the desolate grounds, Sarah left the asylum, her heart heavy with the knowledge of the horrors that had transpired within its walls. She knew that her journey was far from over, and that the sinister welcome she had received was only the beginning. The night's darkness enveloped her as she made her way back to her hotel, the whispers of Blackstone's tortured souls echoing in her ears. As she lay in bed that night, sleep once again eluded her. The chilling images from the day's discoveries haunted her thoughts, and she knew that her life would forever be intertwined with the malevolent forces that lurked within Blackstone Asylum. As dawn broke, Sarah steeled herself for the days to come. She was determined to confront the shadows that had taken root within the asylum, to expose the evil that had been allowed to fester for far too long. She knew that the road ahead would be fraught with danger and heartache, but she was prepared to face it all in pursuit of the truth. With a renewed sense of purpose, Sarah vowed to return to Blackstone Asylum, to uncover its darkest secrets and bring its sinister past to light. And as the sun rose over the horizon, casting its first rays of light upon the cursed building, it seemed as if the very souls of the damned were watching, waiting for the moment when their stories would finally be heard. Over the following days, Sarah immersed herself in the grim history of Blackstone Asylum. She spent hours poring over old records, newspaper clippings, and the tattered documents she had found in the asylum's depths. As she pieced together the tragic stories of the patients who had lived and died within the asylum's walls, she felt a growing sense of responsibility to give them a voice, to ensure that their suffering would not be forgotten. Each day she returned to the asylum, accompanied by the ever-apprehensive Dr. Hawthorne. Together, they delved deeper into the haunted halls, uncovering more of the sinister secrets that had been buried beneath layers of dust and decay. With each new discovery, Sarah's resolve to expose the truth only grew stronger. One afternoon, as they wandered through the decaying corridors, Sarah heard a faint, whispered voice calling her name. It seemed to be coming from a heavy wooden door at the end of the hallway, its paint cracked and peeling with age. "Sarah, Sarah." The voice beckoned, its desperate tone chilling her to the bone. Dr. Hawthorne paled, his eyes darting nervously between Sarah and the door. "I don't think we should go in there, Miss Adams," he warned, his voice trembling. "There are some places in this asylum that are best left undisturbed." Despite his warning, Sarah felt a strong compulsion to follow the voice, as if the spirits of Blackstone Asylum were guiding her to uncover yet another hidden truth. With a determined nod, she approached the door, her heart pounding in her chest. She gently pushed the door open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with rows of dusty, long-abandoned cells. The air was thick with sorrow, and the walls seemed to echo with the anguished cries of those who had been imprisoned within. Sarah slowly made her way through the room, her flashlight cutting through the darkness and casting eerie shadows on the walls. As she examined each cell, she couldn't help but feel the overwhelming sadness and despair that had once filled the air. As she reached the last cell, the whispered voice grew louder, more insistent. "Sarah, help us," it pleaded, sending a shiver down her spine. In the far corner of the cell, Sarah discovered a small, hidden compartment in the wall. With trembling hands, she opened it, revealing a stack of yellowed letters, their ink faded with time. She carefully unfolded one of the letters, her heart aching as she read the desperate words of a patient who had been subjected to the asylum's horrific treatments. The letters detailed the patient's pain and suffering, their pleas for mercy and cries for help falling on deaf ears. As Sarah read their words, she felt a deep connection to the lost souls who had been trapped within Blackstone Asylum, their lives reduced to nothing more than whispered memories in the shadows. With each letter, the weight of their pain and despair threatened to crush her, but Sarah refused to be deterred. She knew that their stories deserved to be heard, and she was determined to be their voice. As she and Dr. Hawthorne left the cell, the whispers in the shadows seemed to grow quieter, as if the tormented souls of Blackstone Asylum were momentarily appeased by Sarah's discovery of their long-forgotten letters. As they made their way back through the desolate corridors, Sarah felt a newfound sense of purpose. She knew that she had a duty to share the stories of those who had suffered within the asylum, to bring their pain and torment to light, and to ensure that their voices would never again be silenced. Over the following days, Sarah worked tirelessly to transcribe the letters, meticulously documenting each account of suffering and despair. With each word, the whispers in the shadows seemed to grow louder, urging her on in her quest for the truth. Sarah continued to unravel the mysteries of Blackstone Asylum, each new piece of information further solidifying her conviction to bring justice to those who had suffered. As the days passed, she felt an increasing connection to the spirits that lingered within the asylum's haunted halls. It was as if they were guiding her, providing her with the strength and determination to see her mission through to the end. Even Dr. Hawthorne, who had initially been so reluctant to explore the asylum's darkest corners, could not deny the power of the whispers in the shadows. Though he still harbored his reservations, he found himself drawn into Sarah's quest, unable to turn his back on the suffering that had been allowed to fester within the asylum's walls for far too long. Together, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne delved deeper into the asylum's dark past, uncovering long-buried secrets and forgotten tales of torment. And as they shone a light on the darkness that had consumed Blackstone Asylum, the whispers in the shadows seemed to grow stronger, their voices finally being heard after decades of silence. With each new revelation, Sarah knew that she was getting closer to the truth that would finally set the spirits of Blackstone Asylum free and ensure that their stories would never be forgotten. Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne continued their investigation, uncovering the sinister secrets hidden within Blackstone Asylum. The spirits that haunted the halls seemed to grow more restless with each passing day, their whispers growing louder, urging Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne to delve deeper into the darkness. One evening, as they explored an old, forgotten wing of the asylum, they stumbled upon a door that seemed to emit an aura of pure dread. The door was covered in scratches, as if someone, or something, had tried desperately to escape from within. With a feeling of trepidation, Sarah unlocked the door, revealing a large room shrouded in darkness. As her flashlight swept across the walls, she discovered that the room was filled with old, decaying paintings, each one depicting a patient who had once resided within the asylum. As they examined the paintings, they noticed that the eyes of the subjects seemed to follow them, their expressions filled with sorrow and torment. The air in the room was heavy with despair, and Sarah could feel the pain of the spirits that lingered there. As they ventured deeper into the room, they came across a painting that stood out from the others. It depicted a young woman with hollow, haunted eyes, her expression one of unspeakable terror. The plaque beneath the painting identified her as Elena Gray, a patient who had been admitted to the asylum under mysterious circumstances. As Sarah examined the painting, she felt a chill run down her spine, as if Elena's tortured soul was reaching out to her from beyond the grave. She knew that she had to learn more about this young woman and the horrors she had faced within the asylum's walls. Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne began to search for any records or documents related to Eleanor Gray. They combed through the asylum's archives, piecing together her tragic story. Elena had been admitted to Blackstone Asylum after the sudden death of her family, and though the details were scarce, it was evident that she had been subjected to horrifying treatments in an attempt to cure her of her grief. The more they learned about Elena, the stronger the connection between her and Sarah seemed to grow. It was as if Elena's spirit was guiding them, urging them to uncover the truth and bring her story to light. As they continued their investigation, the haunted halls of Blackstone Asylum seemed to come alive around them. The whispers in the shadows grew more insistent, and the atmosphere became even more oppressive, as if the spirits were growing impatient for the truth to be revealed. Determined to honor Elena and the countless others who had suffered within the asylum, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne pressed on, uncovering the darkest secrets of Blackstone's past. With each new revelation, the spirits seemed to grow stronger, their whispers turning into cries for justice. Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne continued their exploration of the asylum, guided by the restless spirits that haunted its halls. They could feel the energy of the spirits growing stronger with each passing day, their presence more tangible than ever before. One day, while examining a hidden room behind a crumbling wall, Sarah discovered a dusty, leather-bound journal. Its pages were filled with the frantic scribblings of a doctor who had once worked at the asylum. The entries detailed the doctor's growing unease with the horrific treatments being administered to the patients and his attempts to expose the cruel practices of his colleagues. As they read the journal, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne realized that the doctor's efforts to bring about change had been met with resistance and ultimately led to his untimely death. It seemed that the doctor's spirit, too, was now bound to the asylum, unable to find peace until the truth was revealed. Driven by a sense of duty to the forgotten souls of Blackstone Asylum, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne delved deeper into the asylum's past, uncovering a web of lies, deceit, and unspeakable cruelty. They discovered that many of the patients had been subjected to experimental treatments and brutal procedures, their suffering swept under the rug and hidden from the world. As they delved further into the asylum's dark history, the spirits that haunted its halls seemed to grow more restless, their whispers turning into anguished cries for justice. It was as if the ghosts of Blackstone Asylum were gathering around Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne, urging them to bring their stories to light and hold those responsible for their suffering accountable. With each new secret they uncovered, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility to the souls that had been lost and forgotten within the asylum's walls. They knew that they had to expose the truth, no matter the cost, to ensure that the suffering of the patients would not be in vain. As the days turned into weeks, the pair grew more resolute in their mission. They tirelessly gathered evidence, piecing together the horrifying puzzle that had been hidden for decades. And as they prepared to bring their findings to the public, they knew that they were not alone. The spirits of Blackstone Asylum were with them, standing united in their quest for justice. With a wealth of evidence in their possession, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne began to plan how they would expose the horrific secrets of Blackstone Asylum. They knew that they would face opposition and disbelief, but they were determined to bring justice to the tortured souls that haunted the asylum's halls. One night, as they prepared to leave the asylum, they were startled by a sudden chilling presence that seemed to fill the air. The temperature in the room dropped dramatically, and they could feel an unseen force surrounding them. The whispers of the spirits grew louder, more insistent, as if urging them to leave at once. As Sarah looked around, her flashlight flickered, revealing a dark, shadowy figure standing in the corner of the room. The figure seemed to be watching them, its eyes glowing with an eerie, malevolent light. Fear gripped Sarah's heart, but she knew that she couldn't let this entity deter her from her mission. Dr. Hawthorne, sensing the danger they were in, urged Sarah to leave the room immediately. They hurried through the dark, winding corridors of the asylum, the eerie presence seemingly following them, its cold breath on their necks. Finally, they emerged into the safety of the night, their hearts pounding in their chests. As they looked back at the asylum, they could see the shadowy figure watching them from a window, its eyes still burning with a malicious intent. Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne knew that they had disturbed something powerful and dangerous within the asylum, an entity that would stop at nothing to protect the secrets of Blackstone Asylum. But they were undeterred, their determination to expose the truth only growing stronger in the face of adversity. Over the following days, they worked tirelessly to compile their evidence and prepare their case against the asylum. They knew that the entity that haunted the asylum would be a formidable foe, but they were prepared to face it head-on for the sake of the countless souls that had been lost within Blackstone's walls. As Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne continued to gather evidence and prepare their case against Blackstone Asylum, they knew that they had to learn more about the dark entity that haunted its halls. They began to research the asylum's past, searching for any clues that might help them understand the malevolent force they were up against. Their research led them to a series of grisly tales surrounding the asylum's founder, Dr. Alistair Blackwood. It was said that Dr. Blackwood had dabbled in the dark arts, using the suffering of his patients to fuel his twisted experiments. Rumors whispered of a terrible ritual he had performed, one that had summoned the dark entity that now haunted the asylum. As Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne delved deeper into Dr. Blackwood's dark past, they discovered that he had been obsessed with the pursuit of immortality. He had believed that by harnessing the power of the tortured souls within the asylum, he could transcend the boundaries of life and death. Driven by his insatiable ambition, Dr. Blackwood had conducted a series of horrifying experiments on his patients, pushing the limits of human suffering in an attempt to unlock the secrets of eternal life. It was during one of these gruesome rituals that the dark entity had been summoned, binding itself to the asylum and its tormented souls. With this knowledge, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne realized that they not only had to expose the truth about Blackstone Asylum, but also find a way to sever the dark entity's connection to the asylum and free the spirits trapped within its walls. As they prepared to confront the entity, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne drew strength from the spirits of Blackstone Asylum, who stood with them in their quest for justice. They knew that the battle ahead would be difficult and dangerous, but they were determined to see it through to the end, no matter the cost. Armed with the knowledge of Dr. Blackwood's dark past and the nature of the entity haunting Blackstone Asylum, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne devised a plan to sever its connection to the asylum and free the trapped spirits. Their research pointed to a particular location within the asylum, a long-forgotten corridor known as the Screaming Corridor, where the dark ritual had taken place. As they made their way through the eerie halls of the asylum, the whispers of the spirits seemed to grow more urgent, guiding them towards the Screaming Corridor. The atmosphere grew heavier with each step, the air thick with the malevolent energy that had been trapped within the asylum for decades. Upon reaching the entrance to the corridor, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne were confronted by a chilling sight. The walls were lined with the anguished faces of the spirits trapped within, their silent screams echoing through the air. The dark entity's presence could be felt all around them, its cold, malevolent touch like a weight upon their shoulders. Taking a deep breath, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne stepped into the Screaming Corridor, their hearts pounding in their chests. They knew that they had to confront the dark entity at the heart of the corridor and sever its connection to the asylum, no matter the danger that lay ahead. As they made their way down the corridor, the screams of the trapped spirits grew louder, their pain and suffering almost too much to bear. The dark entity seemed to feed off their torment, growing stronger and more powerful with each passing moment. Finally, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne reached the end of the corridor, where they found a room filled with remnants of Dr. Blackwood's twisted experiments. At the center of the room stood a dark, swirling vortex, the source of the entity's power and the key to severing its connection to the asylum. With the spirits of Blackstone Asylum watching over them, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne prepared to face the dark entity and put an end to its reign of terror once and for all. As Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne prepared to confront the dark entity in the heart of the Screaming Corridor, they discovered a hidden chamber that contained the gruesome truth behind Dr. Blackwood's experiments. The room was filled with shelves of jars, each one containing a piece of a patient's soul that had been cruelly extracted in Dr. Blackwood's quest for immortality. The sight of the jars filled Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne with both horror and determination. They knew that they had to destroy Dr. Blackwood's twisted legacy and free the tormented souls trapped within the asylum. As they searched the chamber, they found an ancient tome containing the ritual that Dr. Blackwood had used to summon the dark entity. With this knowledge, they devised a plan to reverse the ritual, severing the entity's connection to the asylum and freeing the trapped spirits. With the spirits of Blackstone Asylum standing beside them, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne began to perform the ritual. As they chanted the ancient words, the dark entity's presence seemed to grow more powerful, as if it was trying to resist their efforts. The air in the room grew thick with tension, the swirling vortex at the center of the room threatening to consume them. But Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne held fast, their voices rising above the chaos, united in their determination to vanquish the darkness that had haunted Blackstone Asylum for far too long. As the ritual reached its climax, the dark entity let out a terrible, unearthly scream, the sound echoing through the halls of the asylum. And then suddenly it was gone, its connection to the asylum severed, its power over the trapped spirits broken. With the dark entity banished and the souls of the tortured patients freed from their eternal torment, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne felt a profound sense of relief. However, they knew that their work was far from over. It was time to expose the truth about Blackstone Asylum and bring its sordid history to light. As they gathered their evidence and prepared to leave the asylum, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was still amiss. Though the dark entity had been vanquished, the air within the asylum remained heavy with an ominous energy. As they made their way through the haunted halls one final time, they began to encounter malevolent apparitions, vengeful spirits that had been twisted by their suffering and now sought to unleash their wrath upon the living. Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne realized that the spirits of Blackstone Asylum had been shattered by the darkness they had endured, their souls fractured beyond repair. In order to truly free the spirits and put an end to the asylum's reign of terror, they would need to find a way to heal the wounds that had been inflicted upon them. As they confronted the vengeful apparitions, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne drew upon the strength and support of the spirits that still sought justice and peace. Together, they fought to subdue the malevolent spirits, using the knowledge they had gained from the ancient tomb to heal the fractures in their souls and set them free from their torment. With each spirit they helped, the atmosphere within the asylum began to lighten, the darkness slowly receding before the light. As they continued their battle against the malevolent apparitions, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne knew that they were not alone. The spirits of Blackstone Asylum stood with them, united in their quest for justice and redemption. Having vanquished the malevolent apparitions and healed the fractured souls of Blackstone Asylum, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne finally felt that they had the evidence and the power to bring the asylum's horrific secrets to light. They were determined to expose the terrible deeds that had been committed within its walls and ensure that those responsible would be held accountable. As they prepared to leave the asylum and share their findings with the outside world, they couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of unease. The darkness within the asylum had been pushed back, but it seemed to them that some malevolent force still lurked within its depths, waiting for the opportunity to strike. Despite their apprehension, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne knew that they could not delay any longer. They gathered their evidence and made their way towards the exit, the spirits of the asylum watching over them, their presence a source of strength and comfort. As they stepped outside the asylum and into the light of day, they knew that their journey was far from over. The truth about Blackstone Asylum had to be revealed, and the dark forces that still lurked within its halls had to be defeated once and for all. As they made their way through the city, they began to notice strange occurrences, shadows that seemed to follow them, whispers that echoed through the empty streets. It became increasingly clear that the malevolent force that had once been bound to the asylum had somehow found a way to follow them, its sinister influence beginning to spread beyond the confines of Blackstone Asylum. Realizing that the battle against the darkness was far from over, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne resolved to put an end to the lurking madness that threatened to engulf them. They knew that they would need to find a way to defeat the sinister force once and for all, ensuring that the spirits of Blackstone Asylum could finally rest in peace. As the sinister force that had once haunted Blackstone Asylum continued to pursue Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne, they knew they had to act quickly to find a way to defeat it. They realized that they needed to consult experts in the supernatural to better understand the entity and devise a plan to vanquish it once and for all. Seeking refuge in a remote safe house, they began to contact scholars, occultists, and paranormal investigators, sharing their findings and seeking guidance on how to confront the malevolent force that now threatened their lives. After countless conversations and sleepless nights spent poring over ancient texts, they discovered a ritual that could permanently banish the sinister force back to the dark realm from which it had been summoned. The ritual would require immense courage and resolve, as well as the combined strength of the spirits they had freed from Blackstone Asylum. With their plan in place, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne gathered the necessary materials for the ritual and prepared to confront the lurking madness that had been stalking them. As they began the ritual, they could feel the sinister force growing closer, its malevolent presence bearing down upon them like a suffocating weight. As they chanted the words of the ritual, the spirits of Blackstone Asylum appeared around them, lending their strength and energy to the desperate attempt to banish the darkness once and for all. The air crackled with supernatural energy as the ritual reached its climax, the sinister force howling in rage and defiance. With a final surge of energy, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne completed the ritual, the power of their voices joined by the spirits of Blackstone Asylum. The malevolent force let out an ear-splitting scream as it was dragged back to the dark realm, its connection to the world of the living severed for good. Exhausted and drained, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne knew that their desperate escape had been successful, the sinister force that had pursued them finally vanquished. With the spirits of Blackstone Asylum now able to find peace, they turned their attention to the task of revealing the asylum's dark secrets and ensuring that justice would be served. With the sinister force banished and the spirits of Blackstone Asylum at peace, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne turned their attention to the task of revealing the asylum's dark secrets. They compiled their evidence and prepared to share their findings with the world, determined to ensure that the horrific events that had taken place within the asylum's walls would never be forgotten. As they prepared to go public with their revelations, they discovered a shocking piece of information that would change everything. In the depths of their research, they found evidence that Dr. Blackwood had not acted alone in his depraved experiments. A secret society of powerful individuals had supported and protected him, their influence reaching into the highest echelons of society. Realizing the magnitude of the conspiracy, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne knew that they would have to tread carefully if they were to expose the truth and bring those responsible to justice. They decided to enlist the help of a renowned investigative journalist who shared their passion for truth and justice. Working together, they pieced together the full extent of the conspiracy, uncovering a web of deceit and corruption that spanned generations. As they dug deeper, they faced intimidation, threats, and attempts to silence them, but they refused to be deterred. Armed with their evidence and the support of the spirits they had freed from Blackstone Asylum, they pressed forward in their quest for justice. With the full extent of the conspiracy now laid bare, Sarah, Dr. Hawthorne, and the investigative journalist worked tirelessly to expose the truth about Blackstone Asylum and the secret society that had supported its depraved experiments. They knew that they faced powerful enemies who would stop at nothing to maintain their secrecy and protect their interests. Undeterred, they began to make their findings public, sharing the evidence they had gathered with law enforcement, the media, and anyone who would listen. As the truth about Blackstone Asylum and the secret society began to spread, a wave of shock and outrage swept the nation, sparking calls for justice and accountability. One by one, the members of the secret society were exposed, their crimes revealed for all to see. As the authorities closed in, many of the conspirators found themselves facing the wrath of the spirits they had once sought to exploit. The malevolent apparitions they had created through their vile experiments turned on them, exacting a brutal and fitting retribution for their sins. In the midst of the chaos, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne worked to bring the remaining members of the secret society to justice, their determination unwavering in the face of the powerful forces arrayed against them. With the spirits of Blackstone Asylum standing beside them, they fought to dismantle the conspiracy that had allowed the asylum's atrocities to continue for so long. With the secret society exposed and its members brought to justice, a sense of closure and peace began to settle over the city. The horrors of Blackstone Asylum had been laid bare, and the victims of its atrocities could finally rest, their suffering acknowledged and their voices heard. In the aftermath of the shocking revelations, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne worked to ensure that the legacy of Blackstone Asylum would serve as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of compassion and empathy in the face of suffering. They collaborated with the investigative journalist to write a book detailing their experiences, providing a chilling account of the asylum's dark past and the courageous battle to expose the truth. As the book gained widespread acclaim, Sarah and Dr. Hawthorne became advocates for mental health reform, using their newfound platform to call for change and increased oversight in the treatment of vulnerable individuals. Together, they fought to dismantle the stigma surrounding mental health and to create a world in which the atrocities of Blackstone Asylum could never happen again. As the spirits of Blackstone Asylum looked on, they could finally find solace in the knowledge that their suffering had not been in vain. Through the efforts of Sarah, Dr. Hawthorne, and the many others who had joined their cause, the world was becoming a better, more compassionate place, and the darkness that had once reigned within the asylum's walls was at last dispelled.